Hey guys, this is Eckhart Hello and welcome to another Star Wars video. This is my first video back since Christmas, so Merry Christmas to everyone, Happy Holidays, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the year, and of course have a great 2020. We are continuing our coverage today of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and specifically looking at the massive Sith fleet, which much of the movie is focused on. First though, a bit of nomenclature, because some of the wording here is a bit difficult. You can sort of say that there are three bad guy factions in Episode 9, and spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie yet. There's the First Order, which the good guys have been fighting in the prior two films. There's the Sith Eternal, which is the Sith faction, led by Palpatine, the one that's on Exegol. Then lastly, there is the Final Order, which seems to be Palpatine's ultimate empire. It's sort of the combination of the Sith Eternal, the First Order, and basically everything else at his disposal. In other words, the Final Order seems to include the First Order within, as well as Palpatine's Sith elements. So just keep that in mind as we talk about today's video, and just try not to worry about it too much. So as I covered in a prior dedicated video on the topic, the ships that we thought were modified Imperial Star Destroyers before seeing the Rise of Skywalker are actually a new breed of ship, the Xyston class. The Xyston was a 2.4 kilometer long battleship armed with an axial super laser capable of destroying planets. It was obviously based on the designs of the smaller Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer, though was not a modified ship, but rather a brand new creation. We don't actually learn much about the Xyston class from the Rise of Skywalker itself, but the visual guide tells us that there are hundreds of these ships within the Sith fleet, and based on the movie, I would guess that perhaps there's over 1,000. And clearly they represent an existential threat to the galaxy. If the Xystons are able to leave Exegol, as the movie explains, it's basically the end of good, and the Empire will dominate. We also know that the Xyston was based off of not only, of course, the Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer, and presumably the Imperial 2, but also newer First Order designs, including the Mandator 4. The question is, where did these ships come from? I mean, we see them locked in ice at the beginning of Episode 9. Were they set there by Palpatine sometime before his death? Were they produced afterwards? What exactly happened? Well, there's not exactly an answer to this, but we do get some hints from the visual dictionary. So I'm going to look at those and later do some speculation as well. First of all, we know that the New Republic by the time of the First Order conflict was in immense turmoil. The government had literally split, with some of the centrist systems, i.e. those who wanted a centralized power, actually seceding and thus joining the First Order. What's more, we know from books like Bloodline that centrist systems were funding the remnants of the Empire and helping to create the First Order, but there's obviously more going on, some of which is explained by the visual dictionary. It expands that idea and states specifically that Sith loyalists within corporations like Kuat and Trala were funneling funds to Exegol itself, which has to have been involved in the creation of the ships. On that note, it's clear that Exegol itself was the home of the Sith Eternal. If you look at any of the character bios for Sith Eternal officers or stormtroopers, it always lists their home planet as Exegol. And it seems like every single member of this new Sith Armada was raised on Exegol by the Sith cultists, then put to work in these new starships, or on the front lines of Palpatine's new army. Now it is a little unclear to me whether Palpatine set this plan in motion, or whether the Sith cultists who seem to have existed on Exegol throughout history were already doing something, then Palpatine came back after Endor and basically co-opted their efforts. If you guys are interested, I'll talk more about this tomorrow maybe, because I think Palpatine's discovery of Exegol is really interesting. It ties back to the Aftermath trilogy, and there's some hints in the visual dictionary. I need to think about this more myself because it's unclear to me, as I mentioned, whether the Sith Eternal have been preparing on their own or whether their actions have been directed by the Emperor himself. I'm not sure it really matters for today's video, but I will say it's interesting that most of the recruits seem to be very, very young, at least by military standards, almost as if they were grown for the job. But that takes us back to the issue of starships. How did the Final Order or the Sith Eternal create so many powerful Star Destroyers in a limited time frame, especially because it seems like almost all of the ships were constructed on or within Exegol itself? I say within because I find it very, very interesting that the Sith ships actually emerge from ice, leading me to believe that they may have been constructed within the planet. I say it's interesting because the visual dictionary makes lots of references to the interior of the planet and something being buried within. Here's an interesting quote. Enormous fissures reach deep into the planet's crust. They were excavated by Sith loyalists in centuries past in a bid to reach a transportive vergence they believed to be hidden in the rock. On that page, by the way, it also explicitly mentions that the fleet was built at the planet. But it's important to realize, I think, that this is more than just a Sith world. It's meant to be, I think, representative of the dark side of the Force itself. Whether the Vergence or the Nexus itself actually existed, the Sith treated it as a bastion, a planet hidden in the unknown regions that was unknown to the galaxy and also impossible to reach without a wayfinder. It was the perfect place, as we see in episode 9, to build up a secret fleet, and it had likely been that way for thousands of years, and this is where I get into a bit of theorizing. It's very possible, in my opinion, especially given the fact that the ships rise from inside the planet, that it would be very difficult to set up supply lines to Exegol, and that the visual dictionary focuses on fissures and the planet's interior, that inside Exegol is some sort of Sith furnace, perhaps a super weapon like the Star Forge, or another automated factory like a World Devastator that is able to produce ships en masse. That could have been responsible for the creation of the fleet. It would also explain why ships of a single type were produced en masse. It's basically like a blueprint being produced over and over, and I just think it fits the lore really nicely. I'll talk about this more if you guys want a video on how Palpatine discovered Exegol, or theorizing when he discovered Exegol, but I believe the planet itself was a source of immense power. And I mean, when you look at it, everything besides for the Citadel itself is below surface, so I think there's something really strange going on there. However, that's just my opinion. Personally, I think the whole Final Order and Hidden Fleet aspect of this movie was really awesome and probably one of my favorite bits. But what did you think? Where do you think the Final Order was created? How were all of these Star Destroyers built away from public scrutiny? Let me know all of that and more down in the comments. Hope you guys had a great Christmas, a happy holidays, and I hope New Year's Eve and the new year itself is good to you. Until then, this has been Eckhart Slatter. Have a great day, and may the Force be with you.